Okay guys, so what we're going to be doing today is actually something that I did for fantasy baseball. I did fantasy baseball like rankings and stuff, and I thought rather than doing that for fantasy football, we would just do a few mock drafts. So that's what we're going to do on Mondays and Thursdays for the next week or two until the release of Madden 15. Then you can expect Madden 15 videos to be put out every single Tuesday and Thursday, and possibly more than that, or Monday and Thursday, and possibly more than that. I think I might do two franchises, try to juggle the two franchises with the baseball franchise. It's going to be a lot of editing for me, but in the end, I think it'll be pretty worth it. So, right now, we're looking at ESPN Fantasy Snake Draft. I think that's where most people actually do their fantasy drafts. I think we'll do an auction next time, but for right now, we're going to do a snake draft. We have the 7th overall pick, Team Nolan. Team Nolan, don't look here so you don't see my last name, but whatever. It's not like it matters. Not like I have much on the internet for you guys to find anyways. So, please don't take that as a challenge. I know some people are going to take that as a challenge to dig up as much information on me as they can, but whatever. So top 7 picks. So what you really want in fantasy, obviously, is one of the top 4 picks. So you can get Adrian Peterson, LeSean McCoy, Jamal Charles, or Matt Forte. Personally, I have them ranked Charles, McCoy, Forte, Peterson, just because to me Peterson has the least appeal as a pass catcher. Jamal Charles has the most appeal, LeSean McCoy has the second most appeal, and Forte and McCoy for me are pretty much dead even in terms of pass catching appeal and what they can do. So outside of those top 4, that's where the talent starts to significantly drop. Marshawn Lynch, I know ESPN has Marshawn Lynch rated as the 5th best running back, 5th best player in fantasy, but CBS Sports and a lot of other leagues that I look at say Marshawn Lynch is probably going to bust this year, and I can see the logic behind it. Marshawn Lynch had a huge workload, and you don't know what's going to happen. So first off, I would like to say don't do what this freaking idiot did and draft Peyton Manning number 1 overall, because even if Peyton Manning gives you the same production that he gave last year, he's still not going to be as great as some of these top running backs. Peyton Manning, there's probably going to be a significant drop-off in touchdowns. I know you can say that he's not going to have as many touchdowns because he doesn't have Eric Decker, but that's honestly just not true. He's got Emmanuel Sanders, I believe, and Emmanuel Sanders is just going to fill in the exact same production that Eric Decker did. He's still got both of the Thomases and Wes Welker, and those are going to be his main targets anyways, along with Monte Ball, who's going to take over from Noshan Moreno. So here you see the logic. 2 extreme starting running backs, not extreme, but 2 great starting running backs being taken. I'm probably not going to be able to get Jamal Charles or Matt Forte. I don't really want to draft Marshawn Lynch. So the next best player to me would be Eddie Lacy. I feel like Marshawn Lynch should be down in the Arian Foster range, so about 9 or 10 would be my range for Marshawn Lynch. Arian Foster, I'd probably drop him to about the DeMarco Murray, Le'Veon Bell range, because he has had significant injuries in the past, and he does have a history of injuries, although he is not that old, not as old as many people think he is. Jamal Charles goes there, obviously. And he had like half a season of rest last season, so his body may come back better this year, but I don't really want to be the person to gamble on Arian Foster. I'd rather take a safe bet with Eddie Lacy, although Eddie Lacy has had some injury history also. So Marshawn Lynch goes 5th overall. That is, to me, a completely stupid move. So there's a lot of things I can do with the 7th pick. Matt Forte, let's just assume Forte gets taken off the board, which he does. I could go Lacy, Calvin Johnson, or Jimmy Graham. I'd be fine with any of these 3 guys. If you're in a PPR league, I would definitely go with Calvin Johnson in this spot or Jimmy Graham in this spot. However, in just a regular league, I feel like Eddie Lacy as a number 1 running back, he's just outside that top tier of running backs where most of these guys are, so I would take him, although Jimmy Graham is an elite tight end and Calvin Johnson is by far the best wide receiver, but you need to start off with a strong running game in most leagues, so Eddie Lacy is going to be my number 1 overall pick, or the number 7 overall pick, my first pick. Alright, so now we're going to talk a little bit deeper into this draft pool. So you got guys like DeMarco Murray, who is going to be on a strong offense. However, he does have some injury risk. Demaryius Thomas, who if you can get Demaryius Thomas, like 13th, 12th overall, definitely take Demaryius Thomas. Always, I don't want to say always, if you want a quarterback like Aaron Rodgers or something early, take him early, but just know there's guys that are better that you can wait on later. Like, you can wait, and 62 overall, you can get, actually, we'll go with 63 overall, you can get Nick Foles, he's decent. You can get Matthew Stafford at 39th, who's going to have very similar to production to Aaron Rodgers. So Calvin Johnson goes 8th overall. I can't say that I disagree with that. Calvin Johnson is a great wide receiver. He is probably going to lead all of the NFL in passes caught, yards, wide receiving touchdowns possibly. So I really can't argue with drafting Calvin Johnson 8th overall. So some strategies you may want to think about when doing your fantasy draft is what you're going to do in the next round while you're drafting now. So I went running back in the first round. Now I have many choices. I can go running back, wide receiver, running back, quarterback, running back, tight end. There's a lot of different things you can do. In most instances, I'd say go running back, wide receiver, unless you can get a really good running back number 2. And in most cases, you'll probably be able to get a good running back over number 2. Like Le'Veon Bell is a good running back number 2. DeMarco Murray, I suppose, is a good running back number 2. Doug Martin, although he does come with injury risk. So Aaron Rodgers just went. Alfred Morris is a good running back number 2. A guy I really like for running back number 2 is Zach Stacy. I actually picked him up last year, and he was my running back number 2 for half of the season, and he was great. Guys like Giovanni Bernard are like top-tier running back number 2s in my mind. Giovanni Bernard, Monte Ball, I don't know. He did have some fumble struggles last year, so you never know about that. Alfred Morris is going to get a lot of touches in the red zone, I think. So those are your like tier 1 number 2 guys, tier 2 number 1 guys. They're like low-end running back number 1s, high-end running back number 2s. Although if you're looking for a guy later in the draft that you can get for running back number 2, if you missed out on all of these guys, you can go with Toby Gerhart at 52nd overall. I'd actually take Toby Gerhart probably like 5 to 10 spots earlier if you wanted him, because he is a main running back on a great team. Well, not a great team, actually a terrible team. He's a running back that's going to get a lot of touches because the team is terrible. So now you see after Demaryius Thomas went, Dez Bryant goes, and usually when as soon as Demaryius Thomas or Dez Bryant goes, then you'll see a lot of wide receivers go off the board. But since there's a few teams on auto pick, I don't know. Yeah, I see AJ Green going now. So this whole class of running backs here is getting skipped over for the top tier wide receivers. So if this happens in your draft, definitely look to take one of these guys, because you might be able to flip one of these guys for one of those top tier wide receivers later in the season. Because some of these guys probably don't have great running back number 1s because they picked so early in the draft. So, like, we'll take a look at Team Hill. He had back-to-back picks. So, Team Hill, he went with DeMarco Murray and Demaryius Thomas. You don't know. DeMarco Murray, by the midpoint of the season, he may be broken down. He may be in need of a running back number 1, running back number 2 type guy. You offer him, like, a Doug Martin or a Zach Stacy that are still healthy, you might be able to get Demaryius Thomas from him. You probably need to give him a little bit more, but you might be able to get Demaryius Thomas from him. So, we're going to come in round 3, and Zach Stacy is the top guy on the board. So right now, what I consider is Zach Stacy, Brandon Marshall, Julio Jones, and Jordy Nelson. These are 3 receivers that are probably going to have very similar production. Maybe less Jordy Nelson, because he's not going to... Jordy Nelson and Julio Jones, because they're not so much red zone targets as Brandon Marshall is. But right now, seeing Zach Stacy on the board and the chance to get another number 1 running back, another guy who's going to have a ton of production, I have to go with Zach Stacy. Although he does play in the tough... what is it? It is the NL West, right? Yeah. I want to say it's the NL West, but I feel like it's a different abbreviation. I'm not sure. But he plays in the West. He does play with the 49ers, the Seahawks, and the Cardinals. All pretty good defenses. So there you see Brandon Marshall goes the pick after mine. So what I'm going to look to do is in 31st pick, with the 31st pick, I'm going to try to see if Randall Cobb is still on the board. Because Randall Cobb is a guy that I believe will have great production out of his 30th overall draft position. I feel like Jordy Nelson really isn't going to be the true number 1 in Green Bay. Jordy Nelson was the number 1 in Green Bay, so that's why he's projected to be the number 1, but that's because James Jones was hurt for a while, Randall Cobb was out most of this season, what's his name? Not Jordy Nelson. Jermichael Finley was out most of the season, so really Green Bay didn't have any other receivers besides Jordy Nelson. And these are stats with most of the year, him having like second-tier quarterbacks throwing to him. Guys like Scott Tolzien, Seneca Wallace, Matt Flynn. That wasn't with Aaron Rodgers. With Aaron Rodgers, expect Jordy Nelson's production to go up, but expect Randall Cobb's production to be through the roof. Randall Cobb is going to be healthy. Randall Cobb broke his leg a few weeks into the season last year. So expect Randall Cobb to be fully healthy this year, and he'll give you a lot of great production. Reggie Bush, I would steer clear of Reggie Bush. I read some things saying that Joique Bell is probably going to take over the majority of the work in Detroit. It was a committee job anyway, so I wouldn't consider drafting him really high. Ooh, with this pick, I might have to take Julius Thomas, because Julius Thomas, he is, in my opinion, the closest second to Jimmy Graham that you can get. He's consistently good. Last year, Gronkowski, he's that number 3 guy, but Gronkowski, you got to think, is he going to be healthy? Is he going to re-break his arm for like the 4th time now? Is he going to get hurt again? He's a tall guy, but he's had so many injuries, and so many of them were freak accidents, like breaking his arm wrestling in a bar, breaking his arm in the end zone twice, tearing his ACL, getting a helmet to the knee. So many of those were freak accidents, and you have to think about, is some of this going to weigh in on him mentally? Is, like, the fact that he got hit low and tore his ACL, is that going to impact him at all? Is he not going to run as far or as fast? Or is he going to brace himself for these hits more? Is he not going to fight for those extra few yards? Those are all things you got to think about with Gronkowski, and I know most fantasy players don't think this deep. Yeah, so Julius Thomas just goes, so that means that I am pretty much out of top tier tight ends, because part of me really doesn't want to draft Gronkowski. So if Randall Cobb goes here, I will probably draft Gronkowski, and then that's kind of, hold on a sec. Ugh. Yeah, I got something weird in my mouth, and I need a little bit of water, then I'll continue talking. 1 second. So I will take Gronkowski if Randall Cobb goes. That is sacrificing wide receiver a little bit, but you've got this big hit and miss guy in Gronkowski. He can give you a good week. I would say if you are going to draft Gronkowski, look to get maybe a Greg Olsen type guy later in the draft, a guy that you can really fall back on in case Gronkowski does get hurt, because Greg Olsen will get a lot of targets. So Gronkowski goes anyway, but that gives us the chance to draft either Alshon Jeffrey or Randall Cobb, guys with very similar production. I would actually go with Randall Cobb, because I could see Randall Cobb taking over the job as the number 1 wide receiver in Green Bay, as opposed to Alshon Jeffrey, who at most is going to be the number 2 wide receiver in Chicago. And this is coming as a Chicago Bears fan. But I might have considered taking Alshon Jeffrey, just because now Randall Cobb and Eddie Lacy both have the same bye week. And another thing is, don't lock yourself into the team that you drafted. Always be looking on waivers to pick guys up, because you never know who is going to break out mid-season, who's going to have a great season, like Zach Stacy. You got to weigh things when considering picking guys up. I picked up Zach Stacy because it was a week that my second running back was on a bye, or I didn't really have a second running back, because I traded my second running back at that time, who was Darren Sproles. I traded him for some wide receivers after his 4 touchdown game, sold really high on him. And all I really had for running back at that point was Matt Forte and Giovanni Bernard before he was really producing great. He was just producing kind of good, but he was still sharing touches with Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis. So I said, hey, I need a running back. One of these 2 guys was on a bye. So let me look at the running back pool. So there's Zach Stacy. Why did I pick Zach Stacy? Because Sam Bradford had torn his ACL a few weeks ago, so they were obviously going to be running it a lot. Why else would you pick Zach Stacy? Because Daryl Richardson, the number 1 back there, he had just gotten hurt, and so they were going to start Zach Stacy. So why not roll the dice on a guy, Zach Stacy? He could be a huge hit-and-miss player. So here I would recommend going probably Wes Welker, because he's on the Denver Broncos. He's going to get a lot of targets. Percy Harvin, if he can stay healthy, he's going to be a huge impact player this year. He is the dominant number 1 in Seattle. However, Toby Gerhart, this is going to be a guy that we need to draft here. I mean, it's not completely necessary, but there's a lot of good wide receivers that can break out and stuff. A lot of wide receivers down here that we can get. We don't need the top wide receiver like Wes Welker or Percy Harvin. We already have our number 1 wide receiver in Randall Cobb. And we're actually going to look to get Kadarius Patterson, who could have a big breakout year, or Jeremy Maclin, who could also have a big breakout year, or potentially T.Y. Hilton, who could also have a great breakout year. And then there's Emmanuel Sanders, who just expect him to be Eric Decker this year. Golden Tate, who could have a huge breakout year now that he's got a great quarterback in Matt Stafford. Well, not a great quarterback, but a guy who's going to throw it down the field a lot more than Russell Wilson would. Another guy I'd consider taking is Rashad Jennings, but his ADP is a little bit too high for me right now. He is somewhat of an injury risk, so beware when you draft Rashad Jennings. You may not get a full season out of Rashad Jennings, but he will probably be good in the weeks that you do have him. So right now, our roster is shaping up to be pretty good. All we really need is quarterback in the later rounds, wide receiver soon, and a tight end soon. And we're actually going to look for Greg Olsen. I spelled that wrong. Greg Olsen. He's projected to go 104th overall, and he's a guy that can be huge for your fantasy team this year. Cam Newton has barely any other targets, so expect Greg Olsen to see a lot of targets, especially in the red zone. If you were thinking about possibly taking Jordan Cameron, I would advise you to think about taking Greg Olsen over Jordan Cameron, because Greg Olsen's a guy that can have Jordan Cameron type numbers, but he's a big guy. He's going to be able to get over those defenders. He's going to be able to catch those passes in double coverage, get a lot of targets in the red zone. There's not really many other guys for Cam Newton to throw to, so I would expect a big year from Greg Olsen, so I'm going to take him a little bit later in the draft. I can still wait on him, and I can load up on wide receivers now, possibly quarterbacks if I want to. I wouldn't say steer clear, but I don't want most of these quarterbacks that are here right now, like a Nick Foles, RG3. These two guys, Nick Foles and RG3, they're going to be pretty hit and miss this year. RG3, he's going to come back off the injury. He's going to be good, but still expect him to favor the leg a little bit. It's just a mental thing. When a guy tears his ACL, he tends to favor the other leg, and that increases his chances highly to tear the other ACL. It's just like what happened with Derrick Rose. It's a psychological thing, so I would be cautious when drafting Robert Griffin III. Nick Foles, he threw like 27 touchdowns, 2 interceptions last year, and then he threw 2 interceptions in his first preseason game. Nick Foles is going to be a shaky guy. He's not going to be that guaranteed money guy that everyone thinks he is. He's going to be decent. He's not going to be terrible. I don't know what that was. I just got some random Windows update. So, yeah, that was a little crazy. Let's see. So we're waiting for our pick, 55th overall. I think I'm probably only going to play through like the 7th or so round. That'll give you guys a decent start to your draft in terms of all these guys. Guys you might want to steer clear of, definitely Sammy Watkins. He's going to be a great player, but this year I don't expect him to be that great because he doesn't have a great quarterback to throw to him. He's got E.J. Manuel. So Sammy Watkins is probably a guy you're going to want to steer clear of this year. Probably like Keenan Allen last year, where he's projected to go high, but he's not going to be great. So here we're going to take Kadero Patterson. Great breakout potential for him. He's we could have taken Percy Harvin, but yeah, Percy Harvin, human injury machine. A lot of head injuries towards the end of last season in the playoffs and stuff. So Percy Harvin, try to steer clear of him, but he's also an exceptional value where he's being drafted right now. So all up to personal preference whether you draft him or not. So what do we want to do with our next pick? So we've got a lot of guys here, and we're going to need... Well, we don't really need another running back to fill in because we've got Toby Gerhart that we can plug in when Zach Stacy and Eddie Lacy are on bye weeks. I was actually going to suggest, if you haven't taken one by now, going with Bishop Sankey, but of course Bishop Sankey goes now. So expect Bishop Sankey to go around pick 60 because a lot of people know he's a sleeper. He's usually down in these 70-somethings in ADP just because overall that's where he's getting drafted. But Bishop Sankey, he's a starting running back on a team that's probably going to run a lot that's being taken 60th overall. So this is with like Trent Richardson, Chris Johnson, Shane Vereen, guys that are like on the block to lose their starting running back jobs if they don't perform well. And you've got Bishop Sankey, a guy who's got like no clear competitors behind him. Why would you not take Bishop Sankey here? Darren Sproles, I'm glad someone took him. Do not take Darren Sproles if you want my honest opinion. He is not going to do well in that system. They have LaShawn McCoy. What the hell are you thinking taking Darren Sproles? Honestly. So we only have 2 wide receivers right now. So maybe get a little bit more wide receiver depth with like a Michael Floyd, who is going to get a lot of targets. Probably not in the red zone, but he's going to get a lot of yards. Jeremy Maclin, who could potentially have a big season. Reggie Wayne, who could potentially have a big season, but there's like a lot of #1 wide receivers there. Jason Witten, potentially good. Golden Tate, he could be good also. But right now, Michael Floyd dropping this far, you can't pass up Michael Floyd. He's got a great strong arm quarterback who loves to throw it down the field. He's going to get a lot of yards, potentially a lot of touchdowns. So right now, you just want to kind of get your depth guys. Now that we've got our 2 starting running backs, our flex, our 2 wide receivers, and we know that we're going to wait like another 2, 3, maybe 4 rounds on our tight end, who is actually going to be a good tight end. But Jordan Cameron, the reason I wouldn't also recommend taking him is because with Josh Gordon being out half of the season, Jordan Cameron's going to get double coverage. He is going to get more targets than he got last year, but he's going to get less catches because he's going to be double covered, and he's not really seen that in his career. Usually it was Josh Gordon getting double covered, plus there's that whole quarterback situation. You don't know what's going on there. So, yeah, some late route guys you might want to take. Of course, I'm going to be that guy, and I'm going to say Johnny Manziel. Where he's getting drafted, you could easily take him. He could easily be the biggest piece of your fantasy team with the rushing yards he gets, the rushing touchdowns he's going to get, and all the passing yards he's probably going to get. I would recommend taking Johnny Manziel. He doesn't have that many big targets, but he could be a huge breakout player this year. Another guy you might want to consider is Josh McCown. He's getting taken 168th overall. You can easily project Josh McCown for 4,000 passing yards, 30 touchdowns. Easily. And so these guys are obviously guys that you don't want to take as your #1 quarterback. You want to make sure you have at least one consistently good quarterback that you know is going to perform for you, as opposed to just taking these guys as sleepers and hoping that they do really well. So the guy I would recommend for that is actually Ben Roethlisberger at 123. He's a guy that's going to get you probably 4,000 yards, 30 touchdowns also. And he's like a guaranteed 4,000 yard, 30 touchdown guy. He is a great quarterback. He's been a great quarterback in his career. So why would you pass on Ben Roethlisberger? He put up great numbers last year, and he's probably going to be a good quarterback. Although here in the, is this the 7th round, late 7th round, Colin Kaepernick is still on the board. He's another guy. He runs a lot, and these running quarterbacks will get you a lot more points because they get rushing yards. Colin Kaepernick's a guy who can easily rush for 100 yards a game. He's done that earlier in his career when he had wide receivers, and he did have wide receivers that first year that he played, and last year he just didn't really have all the good wide receivers he needed. He didn't have a Michael Crabtree for most of the season. He didn't have all these other guys. So right now, 71 overall. I think this is actually exceptional value for Colin Kaepernick. So we're going to take Colin Kaepernick, and that means we're going to nix Ben Roethlisberger because we don't need him. So then we're going to take probably Josh McCown or Johnny Manziel later in the draft as gamble guys. Not really solid backups, but guys that you can really gamble on. And then you can take a solid backup if you want to, like a Tom Brady. He's going to be a solid backup. There's nothing we immediately need right now except for tight end, which we can get in the next round. We can reach for Greg Olsen, and then Tom Brady will just fall into our laps in round 9. Then you just get your DSTs and your kickers late, and you load up on depth in running back and wide receiver. I probably don't need too much running back depth with this team that I've drafted. I maybe need like one more running back, and I'm probably going to have that be like James Starks, or a whoever the backup running back is in St. Louis. Possibly the, I don't remember his name, but the backup running back of the Browns right now, the guy backing up Ben Tate, because he looks like he could take over the starting job any day now. So those are the only running backs I'd really consider taking at this point. Unless, like, obviously, like, some guy really falls, I'm only going to consider them for backup running back positions. All I need to do now is just stock up in wide receiver depth, too, which I don't really even need to do. I wound up with a pretty good wide receiving team. Randall Cobb, Kadero Patterson, Michael Floyd. Those are 3 pretty good wide receivers. That's a guy who's a #2 that could potentially be a #1 by week 4. A guy that could be a top fantasy player by week 4. A guy that could be great if Larry Fitzgerald's getting up there in age. Michael Floyd might be taking over the #1 role sometime. So what we're going to do now is we're going to reach for Greg Olsen to ensure ourselves a quality tight end. I know some people don't really like Greg Olsen this year. I don't understand really why, but I would recommend taking Greg Olsen if you have this opportunity. Jeremy Hill's another guy you might want to take. He could be the goal line guy in Cincinnati. He could be what BenJarvus Green-Ellis... Him and BenJarvus Green-Ellis... Oh, I don't know what I'm trying to say here. Him and Gio Bernard could have the same relationship that BenJarvus Green-Ellis and Gio Bernard had last year. He could get some goal line carries. He could get some open field carries late in the game. Terrence West. Terrence West was that running back for the Browns that you guys should consider taking. I don't know where he was going, but he's a guy that you could definitely consider. So down here, what you've got, if you've waited on quarterback or running back or something, you've got Ben Roethlisberger, who's going to be solid. You've got Jay Cutler, who's going to be really solid. He's going to have probably a 35 touchdown minimum season, and I hate him, but still, he's going to have a great season. Knile Davis, I would consider taking him too, especially if you have Jamal Charles, just as a safety net if Jamal Charles ever gets hurt. He's going to be the guy there, and in what limited action we've seen him in, he has been phenomenal. Tavon Austin, a guy you might want to steer clear of. Andy Dalton, probably don't want to draft him. He's hit or miss. He's going to have some good weeks. He's going to have some terrible weeks. If you did wait on a tight end even further, Kyle Rudolph is a guy you should really consider drafting. Now that Teddy Bridgewater is there, he's got a better quarterback to deal with. Teddy Bridgewater is a guy you might want to take late in your draft too. If you've got like a Manziel, Josh McCown, Teddy Bridgewater guy that you want to take, or if you just want to take Teddy Bridgewater with these two, that's 3 quarterbacks you could have. You might wind up selling 2 of them in the middle of the season. Like Josh McCown could be great by week 6, and you might want to sell him. Johnny Manziel might be great by week 6, and you might want to sell him. Colin Kaepernick. People are just going to pay for the name Colin Kaepernick and Johnny Manziel. These are guys that you could easily trade for like a number 2 running back, number 2 wide receiver, in my opinion. And you could get guys like Jay Cutler, Ben Roethlisberger, Josh McCown later in the draft, who are going to have very similar production, and you've just got yourself another top-tier wide receiver or running back. Or maybe you pair like Toby Gerhart and Colin Kaepernick and trade him for a Jimmy Graham. That's something that could definitely happen. You've always got to consider making trades, even if you do like guys. You've got to consider trading them and getting the max value out of him. Greg Jennings is another guy you might want to consider getting. He's not that many years removed from having fantastic seasons in Green Bay. He's finally got a solid quarterback. You might want to consider taking Greg Jennings also. So that's basically it for the draft video. So I want to thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to click the like button. Let me know down in the comment section below if you think I drafted a pretty good team here. We got Kaepernick, Lacey, Stacy, Cobb, Patterson, Olsen, Gerhart, Michael Floyd on the bench, and kicker, DST, they don't really matter. Depth, I would draft depth later. But thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to click that like button, and I will see you guys all later. Hopefully I helped you with your fantasy teams.